We are live. So, hello everyone. Welcome
Hi,
back. Alicia,
Becky.
Becky, my bestie. We're going to hang out and talk about some book stuff and some writing stuff. I think today's topic is pet peeves and some leftover trope stuff from last time. Where do you want to start today? So, I know we have some pet peeves with some tropes, so I thought that'd be an interesting mix for the
Yeah,
day.
so why don't we continue with tropes and see where we go from there?
Okay. Favorite and least favorite trope. Let's start there. If you can think of it.
That's so favorite one. I really struggle to identify a favorite trope because I have yet to see one that is like unilaterally done well. Um,
Mm.
there's never one that everybody just nails. So it's hard to be like, yeah, that one's my favorite because it always just comes across really good. Least favorite, there are so many, and sometimes this depends on my mood. Like, sometimes if I'm reading because I want a character that I can commiserate with, like, as a mom, then I might go seek out something with a pregnancy trope. The rest of the time, I hate the pregnancy trope. Because been there, done that, got the stupid t-shirt.
Yeah.
But then there's some that, I think have a lot of potential. The miscommunication trope is
Least
one that I
favorite?
think has a lot of potential,
Mm-hmm.
but is very often done very incorrectly.
Yes, that's my
Um,
least favorite one. But probably because
well,
it's done so poorly most of the time.
it is, and because a lot of people just base it off of immature, hot-headed emotion. From a character, they're not basing it off of, and what I'm going for, because I know I'm using a miscommunication trope, but I think what I'm going for the most there is that both of my lead characters have a lot of baggage from trauma that they're carrying around. And even though they aren't aware of having negatively impacted each other's trauma, they have. So it's very intertwined. So they don't trust each other enough to talk about it. And I think that's the step that a lot of authors miss is, their characters are miscommunicating because there's some sort of, what character A says is not exactly what character B hears. And that leads to, a big misunderstanding. And I think that in order for it to be done well, it should be far more nuanced than that.
Agreed. Which would bring it more out of the trope and into just storytelling.
Yes.
I do think tropes sometimes are crutches. Like we talked about last time, it's also a way of marketing. And so people say it's this trope when it's sometimes not really
Yeah.
a trope.
The
I can
big
tell
one
you my
that's
favorite.
common with lately is the enemies to lovers. That one is a huge one for me because there are so many people who be like, oh, this is enemies to lovers. No, it's not. They argued over who baked a better cookie. It's
Watered down enemies to lovers. I do like enemies to lovers when it's an actual enemies to lovers. Like I can get behind some genuine enemies to lovers. My favorite though, oh my god, I had it in my head and just went. I like fake dating, not my favorite, but I do like fake dating quite often because it's got a lot of the other things in it. I'm reading one now that it's going to make me very happy. Um, why can't I think of what it was? Oh, Grumpy Sunshine. I love a Grumpy Sunshine. I don't think you can really go too far bad with a Grumpy Sunshine. So,
unless you push the character too far into sunshine, I think, and then you run the risk of ending up with just an annoyingly perky character.
a caricature. Yeah, at that point. I can see that. I feel like my camera just keeps getting really, really bright. What is with you? It was fine a moment ago. You saw it. It changed.
Spotlight and Alicia.
I also sometimes a fan, but not usually a fan of the second chance romance. It really depends. I like it when like they have a serious backstory and there's nobody currently in the picture to fuck with a relationship. When somebody's in a relationship and that second chance comes back and they're gonna break up the relationship, I do not like that whatsoever. I do not like starting a book with somebody in a relationship and them having to break up because of another character that pisses me off
Right.
every single time.
And that usually overlays quite a bit with the miscommunication trope too.
To me, it's just like, I don't know. It's not romantic. I don't find the tension fun,
right,
and that kind of thing. But I don't know. Give me a fake dating, grumpy sunshine, enemies to lovers. And I hope
well done.
Read that book.
I asked my husband a little bit ago what some of the ones that bother him are, and it was funny the way he phrased it, because he said, I said, what are some of the tropes that really annoy you? And he said annoying characters. And I thought he was just kind of being, surface level on it for a second. But the example that he gives me is he always falls back to the Lord of the Rings and the character of Gollum, and how they just went really over the top, making that character super annoying.
Is that the one that just kept getting them in trouble because he didn't know any better?
No, that's the one that the freaky emaciated hobbit that was just obsessed with the ring.
That's not. Wait, that's who he's referring to, or that's not who I'm referring to. I'm thinking of
who he's referring to.
It's like Sam.
No. Smeagol / Gollum.
Mm-hmm. That's who he's referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm referring to the friend in the group who, no matter what he does, he fucks shit up, and it's annoying as shit.
I can never remember which of the two hobbits that is, but it's either Mary or what's his name. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm too tired to recall character names right now.
It's been a long time since I've seen the movie. I've never read the book. We'll never read the book. So.
I read Lord of the Rings when I was pregnant with Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
I read it, I think it was in September that year. It was either August or September. And then the first one came out that December.
I don't think I've even seen the last one. Like, I don't know how it ends. This goes back to that whole epic thing. I'm not an epic fantasy kind of person. I don't know. Which is funny because one of my cats' name is Frodo. He just seemed like a Frodo, and he is a turd nugget and a half, let me tell you. Cute. Did you know I have a picture of him that I swear to God looks like he's AI, and he's not? I think that's just him. He's that cute. He could be the cat in anime. Like, anyways, sorry, randomness. I'm trying to think of some fantasy tropes. Like, most of the ones that I go with are romance or romantasy, specifically, where you blend the fantasy and the romance together.
So one of the big ones that you're going to find in either fantasy, romantasy, urban fantasy, one of the big ones you'll find is the chosen one trope.
Yes. Doesn't bother me too much. Depends on how it's done.
The chosen one tropes that really just bug the ever-living shit out of me are the tiny, super young, super inexperienced, super naive chosen one who goes and trains for 2 to 6 months, and all of a sudden just an expert in everything.
Powerful.
And going back to the discussion we were having about Sarah J. Maas in the Throne of Glass series, all of her characters were way too young for the roles that they were in. There is not, and there has never been, a 20-year-old captain of the Royal Guard.
Right. Now the rest of them probably dead. If that's
and ostensibly, the captain of the Royal Guard is not leading military forces either.
He's babysitting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one that bothers me. Is just you have a character who is completely inept at the role that they are put into, and you just get a lot of plot armor thrown in there so that they can just suddenly fit into that role without having earned it.
See, that's one that I took and tried to play with, because like Rhea in my vampire series, like there's a point where she hears the thought of she's the one, but it doesn't mean like she's the only one. It's she's the last missing piece to this big group that we've got to make this fucking work. And that's because of her powers, and she is an absolute shit. She has no idea how to use her powers. She doesn't learn very fast. She keeps getting people hurt. And she's just like, I don't want to do this. And he's like, well, too fucking bad because we need you. And she's like, oh, fuck. But you're all going to help me, right? Yes. Which is a play on that. Which brings me to another one that a lot of a fantasy, especially with the one, do is the orphan.
Yeah.
Which Rhea is also an orphan. So I did that one too. But her and her mom shared a soul, so her mom couldn't be there. And her dad was a phoenix, so her being born killed him too. Yeah, that was fun.
I was like, what's funny is I'm going to go on a little bit of a side quest here, and that's a whole another trope. But I was thinking about you the other day because I was on my walk, and I don't know what it was, but you know how my train of thought just tends to go in like 10 million directions at once, and somehow I stumbled upon the Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, if I was going to ride a Phoenix, I don't have any intention of doing so, but if I did, what would that look like? And so, it got me thinking about what are the properties of what makes a Phoenix a Phoenix. And you got to wonder if a being that, dies / burns to ash, comes back, would said being's powers be intertwined with necromancy at all?
That is a good question. I suppose a little bit, but how?
Right? I don't know.
It makes me think about my Phoenix again, because my Phoenix, in the story that I wrote about him, which was pretty much like him impregnating Rhea's mom, and then subsequently finding out he's going to die because he gets marked, which of course marked by the Phoenix is what it's called. But he teams up with a child vampire in that book, or in that story, which is interesting. And they have to find the mega vampire that's making all these children into vampires, which is a big no-no in the vampire world. Most vampire books do that.
Yeah.
So his connection to death there is an interesting concept I didn't even think of. But for him, a lot of his connections are fire. Fire, healing. He could also communicate via images with touch. So he could take your memories and he could implant, he could show you things with his powers, which was really cool. Or was that the vampire that had that? No, he had it because Rhea has it too. She can actually implant memories into objects, which I think is really cool, and transmutate them as well. She turned a rubber dagger into a real dagger, which is all part of her Phoenix powers. But then again, like I mentioned, she's a god reborn, so how that works, who knows? I don't even know. I just know it's there. I do what they tell me to.
I think that
but a Phoenix necromancer would be interesting story.
Yeah, or even leaving out a full necromancy, but maybe an ability to communicate with the dead or with death himself. That could be an interesting interplay.
There's a book that kind of does it's not Phoenix related, granted, but there's she's not quite a necromancer, but she can bring the dead back to communicate with her before she puts them back. You don't want to keep them that way because they're soulless, empty. What is that called? Shells of themselves. But was it the Foxglove King? Hannah Witten. That was a pretty interesting take on the death myth and the death god and what gods are in general. You just had me go that way because I recently read the first 2 books in that series and I was like, this is amazing. Book 3 just came out. I haven't gotten it yet, but one of those books where it's a romantasy.
Sorry.
Because there is bits of romance in it, but it's more fantasy than it is romantasy. You get a little bit of it, and there's a little bit of a love triangle, but there's no sex in book 1. I don't think there's even sex in book 2. But the tension's there still at the same time, which is why I'm still kind of categorizing it that way. Maybe romantic fantasy. Maybe we'll put it that way. Yeah. So, well, one of the most well done fantasies I've seen in a while. And I'm going to use this to jump off, even though a side quest jumped off back into one of the tropes, but I'm not really a fan of because people do it so much and it's so annoying. And it's the fake medieval setting Like, if you want to make a world, make your world. Why does it have to be medieval with no technology and women have no, like, why do we need that? Why can't we have just a flourishing fantasy world that's got some really, like our world, deep corruption and shit in it, and people just go about doing what they're doing? Like, why can't we have that? Why does it have to be medieval?
So mine, I kind of thrust back into the Dark Ages a bit, but I did it for a reason, because, like, one of the premises of the story has to do with failing magic systems.
Mm-hmm.
And even though their magic systems are flawed to begin with, they are so dependent on them for things like, their version of electricity, or, healing, beauty, any number of things, navigation while at sea, all sorts of stuff that they depend on those little bits of magic. And so when they start failing, this is, it causes problems because they don't have the technology to rely on.
See, but that's interesting. That's not just you plunking people in a castle with some servants and you have to wear a dress and go to court and all these other things just because that's what everybody else does.
Yeah.
And I feel like that happens.
Kind of leads into another one that gets me. What? Is the you've got your female lead, the whole trope of I'm not like other girls, doesn't want to wear dresses at any cost, and
which is totally me as a person and all of my characters. Because fuck you if you want to get me in a dress.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're born royal, at some point you got to put on the damn dress.
Or if you're brought into royalty, like, I get that. Wasn't that in Akatar as well, where she, like, they kept putting her in dresses and stuff, but she was a fighter, and I'm like, I'd be wearing pants underneath my dress at the very least, because one, I can't stand my thighs rubbing together. So that's a big deal for me. That's why, half of why I don't wear dresses. The other half is I don't shave my legs. So, which I went to a party that was like every woman there but me was in a dress, and I was like, y'all, it's not happening. Let me show you why. And I'd like pull up my pant leg, and I'm like, hairier than a man. It's fine. And it's dark Italian hair too, so let's put that out there.
It's just one of those things that you get so used to seeing that particular character, particularly in the romantasy genre, that they all sort of just blend together. Like, there's not a lot of standout. And I will say that was something that I kind of appreciated about Violet Sorrengail as a character, that she doesn't have the opportunity to put on a dress very often. And then the very rare occasion that she does have the opportunity, she fully embraces it. So that was a little bit of a breath of fresh air, even though, she very much fell into the, tiny, frail category, and I totally understand why Rebecca Yarros did that. Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me.
At least she's got reason to be frail.
She does.
I like that she was a different kind of strong too, because a lot of the times to jump off of that is you make the super strong female and you're giving her all the strengths of men instead of having her be a female that's strong doing what we typically think of as female things.
Yeah.
So her being smarter and like poisoning the one guy before the fight, like poisoning is such a female thing.
It really is.
I mean, traditionally, or however you want to say that, but
I think the one thing that bothered me, two things that bothered me about her being, the small, frail character. One is that it's just mentioned so damn often.
That's true.
We get it.
We're not stupid. We got it. Yeah.
Although the flip coin of that is that, like, I know that the reasoning for that is because as she's going through this academy and the training and, learning how to effectively fly and fight with her dragon, she's just very aware of the space that she does not take up. Mm-hmm. And what adaptations she has to make in order to fit into that space. And so I get why it's mentioned so often, because, if you're the odd man out, you're the small one, and you're always trying to push yourself harder, you're always thinking about it, So I get it. But at the same time, as the reader,
get on with it already.
Yeah. We get that. And then I think the other thing that bothers me is that, and I understand that a lot of what carried her through despite her physical limitations, was her intelligence.
Mhm.
I would like to offer this as a counterpoint. Okay, I don't typically consider myself to be a stupid individual, right?
We wouldn't be friends if you were.
No amount of intelligence was going to push me through basic training unless I learned how to do a damn push-up, which took me the whole 2 months, but I did it. And I just kept that just kept popping back into my head as I was reading through the books, that, no amount of brain matter is going to make up for, the lack of muscle when you're trying to pull your body weight up over where it's starting from, or when you're trying to pull somebody else's body weight up. There's
carry your gear.
Yeah, and particularly with the conditions that this character has, and she's talking about how she's always, popping her shoulders out of joint or pulling muscles, and just thinking about those limitations and some of the injuries that I myself saw when I was going through things like obstacle courses. The reality of it gives me some cognitive dissonance when I'm trying to fit my brain into that story.
So being a former soldier kind of takes you out of the soldiery things, because people who are not soldiers and have never been soldiers don't typically write that properly because they don't know.
Yeah, well, and I mean, even people who have, really dependable sources to bounce off of. Like, I know if I really want to get into a military aspect, the first person I'm going to talk to is my husband. Because, yeah, I served for a couple of years, but he's been doing it for almost 2 decades. And he's very damn good at it. So if I had questions there, he would be my first stop.
Mm-hmm.
But, I saw, Laurel K. Hamilton, that's one thing she's really good at, is she works very closely with, police officers and detectives. And she's got, a handful of soldiers that she talks to, trying to get information to make it right, so that the more fantasy that she weaves into her urban fantasy world, the more relatable and realistic it is. And I noticed that one thing in her Mary Gentry series that really just threw me out of it. She's got Mary is being escorted by the Illinois, I think it's Illinois the National Guard. And these guys pull up in their Humvees, and the ranking soldier in one Humvee, the Humvee that she's going to get in, first of all, she's a princess. You're not giving the princess into the care of a sergeant. But also, second, nobody's referring to that sergeant as sir.
It's like 101.
Yeah, so just, little things like that, which is, interestingly enough, a very good segue into pet peeve. Research.
Mm-hmm. I love that a lot of specifically fantasy writers like to go, I wrote myself into a corner. Let's slap some magic on it and fix this.
Research. That, or, they assume that because they are creating a world that they don't need to do any research in support of that world, because everything that they write is of their own imagination, which is fine.
However,
but if you take some of the more fantastical worlds that we've seen, like even jumping from books into screenplays, right? Like if you take Avatar, right? And you look at the world of Pandora and how, how some of those really unique geographical characteristics fit into the world, I guarantee you that wasn't just imagination. Somebody somewhere decided they were going to sit down and they were going to look at things like how gravity works on different worlds in respect to, you've got multiple moons. What kind of plants grow near each other, and how can we base these fantastic plants off of real plants like a willow tree?
I agree. Yeah. Having some kind of realism lets us suspend disbelief instead of questioning everything they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah, because the more you interweave, even if it's just subconscious level detail based on research, the easier it is to just kind of absorb that because it relates to something that you're already familiar with. So it really bothers me when you've got something that should be really, really good, but the research isn't there, so it just feels really hollow.
It makes me have a book suggestion for you. Shit, what the fuck is it called? It's Kelly Armstrong. She did a sci-fi time travel series that she just published her, I think, third book in. And that was one of the things that she mentioned was all of the research that she had to do to make sure she made an accurate historical sci-fi. Oh my goodness. Give me the series, would you? I love it when I look something up. It's like, I don't want to tell you what you're actually looking for. A Rip Through Time novel. It's
I haven't read it yet, but
Canadian detective who goes back in time from being strangled in the same place as another victim, goes back into that victim's body. It's like an 18-year-old housemaid for an undertaker who is a black undertaker, who's the head of his family and like a doctor and all these other things. And so there's a lot of layers in that too.
Mm-hmm.
She does a really fantastic job. That was the first book of hers I read. Go figure. And now I'm just trying to read all of her books. But you want to talk about a good research book, I would highly recommend that series. Just offhand.
Those are things that I really appreciate. Like, and I think that's one of the reasons that I really love, the Outlander series. And then I know that, we've had that conversation before about how it's like really rapey, and it is.
Not my favorite, but yeah.
But the world building and how she blends, a woman from World War II into, 1700s, first Scotland and then France and then America. And, so she really did a lot of research, which isn't surprising. I mean, the woman's got, I think, 2 PhDs. Research is she's no stranger to it by any means.
It reminds me of a Discovery of Witches too.
Yeah. So it's very well written. And I know that there are gaps in the research and that there was some artistic license taken, which is to be expected.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you're an expert in those specific time frames, it's going to come off a lot more seamless. And I think that's important when you're weaving a story.
Agreed. If people looked at my Google search as a writer, they would think I'm a psychopath with how many times I've been like, what's the best place to get shot where you won't bleed out?
There's a doctor on TikTok who answers questions like so that's her thing, is that she does videos based on how to make your injuries and illnesses believable.
That is
I'll see if I can find her again and I'll send you the link. It's really cool.
That is a great niche to get into.
Yeah.
Because people need it. People like me and you, we need it. Oh goodness.
I know. So I got to a part in my book that involved making like beauty products and like healing potions. So I have the home apothecary book, and so I have been learning how to make tinctures and ointments and salves and extracts.
That is awesome.
It's great. I love it.
Oh, speaking of books, so I want to read part 1 of that book I was telling you about, the butter one. Maybe not our next one to give you a chance to get it, or the one maybe our meeting afterwards. But my boss also recommended another book that I have that I don't know where it is, but it's like the romance beats. One of her author friends, because the first one, the butter one, is one of her author friends who makes a good amount of money, and this one also makes a good amount of money. And anybody who makes like millions of dollars on their books that she knows talks about this book.
Pay attention to it a little bit. Yeah,
I would like to include that one in our list of books to read. And I already have it. She mentioned it. I'm like, that sounds familiar. Looked it up. I'm like, I have that book. Just randomly bought it because someone on YouTube mentioned it. Like, because it was like cheap, $7.99 or something like that.
Yeah,
for a physical book. So
that's not.
Okay, but okay, tangent over. But just wanted to put that out there. We should also read that one. And that's short. But are we talking about tropes or pet peeves now?
I think we're on pet peeves now.
Okay. Most of mine are like little copy editing kind of things.
That does not surprise me in the least.
really piss me off. You know what my biggest one is? Did you want to guess what my biggest one is? I don't know if you can or not, but I talk about it all the time.
We talk about so many of our little irks, though, that you're right. I probably wouldn't be able to guess it.
If you want to get me heated, let's talk about some dialogue tags, because holy fuck, I hate anything but said. Like, said is the only dialogue tag you need. Otherwise, if you need to like say that somebody's saying something, show them doing something and attach that to your dialogue. That's like my overarching big pet peeve is people like, oh, he said and she said and I said and over and over and over again. I read a story out loud in my class one time where I got halfway through it. I'm like, did you guys notice how often she uses the word said? They're like, yeah. I'm like, it's annoying, isn't it? Don't do that. Have them do something else. So like action tags is a great way to do that, or an internal thought, or dropping a detail of some kind. That's usually my go-to, drop a detail. But also,
I think
like,
that's the thing with my writing. Like, I have a tendency to use multiple dialogue tags,
mm-hmm.
and they escape me sometimes in editing, but the intent there is to kind of go back and like
maybe add something later.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a tendency to pair them with action tags too, but
don't worry, I'll nix most of them, most likely. Mine is specifically, the one I hate the most is hissed, because it's used so inappropriately, so often. If I go, I hate you, she hissed. Tell me how you hissed that. Go ahead, try hissing it. You can't. There's no S. You're seething is what you're doing. It's a very different word. You cannot hiss that. And people pair that with non-S or C words so often that I'm just like, I cannot read from you anymore. You don't know how to fucking hiss.
I think I've used hissed before, but just because it associates in my mind with that angry whisper, you know. But like every time I do it, you're right. I think about the S because when I do it, I think about, like, you know, if I'm in public with my kids and one of them is making me angry.
Which is a perfect example of how to use it, but people don't use it that way. And that's why it drives me fucking crazy. It's so funny because I complain about it so often that Betty Ann has stopped using the word altogether and has changed it with seethed, because she was using it. And I'm like, no, like if you give it an appropriate, like, stop it, absolutely, use hiss. But if you're going to use something without an S in it, don't use hiss.
Yeah.
Please don't use hiss. But it's also like the overuse of, like, you have to make everything not said. Like, oh, he whispered, or he cajoled, or he probed, or like every once in a while using one of those is a good way to accentuate something, to bring attention to it. But if you use it for every single dialogue tag, it becomes part of the mess to me.
I think those, like, you know, he muttered or he murmured, or, you know, they kind of give context depending on the scene. You know, so if you're sitting, you know, if you and your group of people are in a busy hall and you don't necessarily want others to overhear what you're saying, you might just murmur to somebody. Maybe it's too loud in there to whisper, but you might murmur. You know, things like that give a little bit of context. But you're right that, you know, they do tend to get overused, and I am absolutely guilty of that.
I use them when I'm trying to write fast, and then I try to go back and clean them up. I remember during my graduate program that I had one student made a comment about the book section that they were writing. He goes, it's not a complaint. It's not anything bad. I just wanted to say that I noticed she only used a dialogue tag twice in this entire chunk of book. I'm like, yeah, because I made them do things instead. So I think it's one of those things. Also, another pet peeve that goes along with this, exclamation points. How often people overuse exclamation points. It's, once again, something you sprinkle in when you want to bring attention to that specifically. But if you use one on every page,
they should be used to emphasize things like urgency or anger, or, you know, something like that. Actually, I just used a few of them in the section that I wrote. Was it yesterday or the day before? I didn't write today because I was busy all day, but I have a character who ends up with a nasty little surprise of an experience, and so, you know, the other character that's looking out for her is kind of frantic, so there's some exclamation points in it, and that makes sense for the context because the person might die. Like, this is an important thing.
But even with that as a caveat, I would like not a hard and fast rule, but as a general rule, 1 per 10,000 words. And I know that seems extreme, but if your readers cannot gather that it's urgent, that it's dire circumstances from the way, one, that you chose your words, two, that you've set up the scene, three, from your internals, if you can't get that emotion with all of those things, you decide to use an exclamation point instead, you're being lazy. You're not doing good
I will
writing.
also add the caveat that it's only, in my mind, they are appropriate only inside of dialogue.
Yes. There might
or
be
internal thought, not monologue, but like
right.
You know how when a character's specifically thinking and you italicize it.
Mm-hmm. I just used one in the book I was writing where she's like, and I said, see ya, and I put see ya italicized exclamation point to everybody. Like it was a specific choice to do that because of the way, I don't know, her character.
And I think,
I guess thought it, but
I don't know if this is like common, but to me, the intentional use of an exclamation point is very obvious when compared to unintentional.
Just overuse of it.
Yeah, when they just use it because they seem to think it's appropriate, but it's not really emphasizing things the way that it should.
Mm-hmm.
It's
kind of like using commas for pauses. Sorry.
Guilty.
I know.
Guilty.
I was too before I understood what commas were for. It's all right. But I agree 100%. I'm just picking on you now. I know another thing that a lot of people have pet peeves on, especially now with AI, is M dashes. I love M dashes. Like I use them all over the place.
So that's a funny thing is that I have seen a lot of people talking about that all over social media, and as far as I can tell, almost every author loves M dash.
I had one editor who was like, I don't like M dashes, just use commas. I'm like, commas are good and all, but they don't have the same effect that an M dash. Like an M dash has a very specific thing that it's supposed to do. And it's almost like like a lot of people like to use them for positive phrases, which I do agree should have commas, which I know I'm using grammar terminology. I don't know if you know what that is. It's when you describe something like the car, a black Ford two-door, like you put that in commas to offset describing the car. You don't want to put that in M dashes because that's not what that's for, but a lot of people do that kind of thing. And M dash is a literal, like when we get sidetracked in the middle of a thought, that's offset
or
with
you get interrupted in the middle of a sentence.
Yes. It's some kind of interruption that should happen.
That makes sense because you don't want to. The other option there to me is the potential for like a ... but you don't want to use that all the time because to me that's sort of like a trailing, like the thought just kind of trails off, and whereas opposed to the thought different, very different.
I agree. I also like when it's used sometimes because I'm also, another pet peeve of mine is interrupting dialogue tags. So like you're in the middle of a sentence and you do the comma, he says comma, and then you go on with the rest of the sentence. Like an M dash should be used there, but whatever's in that middle there should be so important you need to interrupt that sentence with it. Otherwise, that pisses me the hell off. Just complete your sentence.
And that needs to be an action. And like if you're interrupting, Lucas, right? Is you have a character named Lucas, and Lucas is talking, and you interrupt for a dialogue tag. That needs to be an action tag that's interrupting the dialogue, or it doesn't make any sense to stop it there. You could end the sentence and then say Lucas said, and then continue with his dialogue.
And see, a good way to do that kind of thing is like when you need that necessary pause, because some people talk that way, where they'll start talking about something and then they'll like go twerks or like intentionally create a pause in the middle to create suspense, like the dramatic pause. Then that works very well. But 9 out of 10 times, maybe even less than that, or more than that, it depends on how we're looking at this. I will nix that kind of shit as an editor. I will like, you don't need this. Why the fuck?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like we're sitting here talking about this, and like I get all of it, and it makes sense, and I know that these things bother me, and I'm going to write them anyway. I absolutely am.
Well, see, that's the fun thing about writing. There's no hard and fast rules. We have rules, but you can break those rules if you know why the rule is there and you're doing it intentionally. Like there's always an exception to something that people says, oh, don't do that. Mine are just personally as a reader and a writer, what I have found works best for most writing.
Right.
are my pet peeves. Like, don't do it.
And I think that's one thing that a lot of authors, particularly new authors or authors that don't put in the effort to improve. They're just worried about knocking out as many titles as they can. Is, the stylistic choice to break rules and how you can use that to amplify your storytelling.
Mm-hmm. It goes
Which
back
should
to
be
that
why you do it.
writing versus storytelling that we started with.
I feel like that's just going to be a common theme that pops up in our discussions. Like, this is just going to show up.
I'm trying to think if there's any other like pet peeves that aren't copywriting, copy editing, stylistic things.
So I have one, and like I've been debating whether or not I wanted to talk about this outside of just a one-on-one discussion with you, because I know you'll get what I'm saying, but I'm probably going to piss people off with this one.
Go for it. I'm all for pissing people off all the time. It's fine.
And I'll explain this.
Okay.
But one thing that really irritates the shit out of me, not because they exist, but because of how they're used most of the time, is trigger warnings.
I don't generally read them, if I'm being honest with you.
I feel like they're overused at this point. Authors are so afraid to hurt anybody's feelings in any way, shape, or form that you have to have trigger warnings for every little thing. But, going back to trope marketing, it's the same. One of the things that bothers me about it is the same issue that I have with trope marketing, is that it gives away a lot of the little things in the story before it should be given away. But the other thing that bothers me about it is, do you really need trigger warnings for violence if the book falls into the category of horror?
Or dark romance, for that matter.
Or dark romance. Like,
don't make it dark. Don't put it as a dark romance if you ain't going to have trigger warnings in it, because it's fucking...
Right. And I feel like the way that they are used in most of the time, you're going to find them at the beginning of a book. I personally, if I have any choice about this when I publish, what I would like to do is have kind of like a page like after the dedication pages that says, there are some themes in this book that are going to bother some people. Please see this page at the back behind the glossary, or, please visit my website for more information. But the thing that really bothers me about it is that there seems to be a demand for trigger warnings
in everything.
And
about everything.
But the obvious ones, like,
oh, there's going to be some violence in my dark romance. There's going to be some likely negative sexual attention in my dark romance. I mean, people are going to die in my horror book.
And
if you're writing like a fantasy and you want to say there's a non-page rape scene, please put that in there. You're like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I get that too. And like, and I've had, that experience with The Last Letter, where it would have been nice to know that, there was, if you didn't watch that previous discussion, here's a little bit of a spoiler alert. With Rebecca Yaros's Last Letter, that, there's a theme of child loss in there. If I had known that before I read the book, I wouldn't have read it. I would have picked something different. But to me, one of my primary goals as a storyteller is to be emotionally evocative. I want you to have an emotional reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I want it to be, and of course there's a balance. I want it to be strong enough that you come back, but not so strong that you don't want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like some of that firepower is negated by, if you open the book and the first thing you see is a list of tropes and trigger warnings.
I thought of another trope I like. He falls first. Sorry. Touch her and die. I like both of those. Anyways, sorry.
So that's one of my big things, and it's a conversation that I haven't really had with anybody before tonight, because it's one of those things that people get really passionate about.
Well, people
And
who really want them, and the people who don't really don't.
You know, whatever floats your boat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum or make anybody feel bad for the things that they need in order to feel good about reading a book. I'm not.
Mm-hmm. However,
there might be a caveat to that too, but that's a whole different thing. But I still want you to have an experience when you're reading my books of, there's some amount of the unknown and the mystery. I don't want to give you formulaic. And I don't want to read formulaic. If I'm 100 pages in to a 600-page book and I can tell you what's going to happen without ever having read it before, why the hell am I reading this book?
I did that to my mom the other day. I say the other day, when I was up there in April/May, we were watching the Deborah Harkness, The Discovery of Witches TV show, which I stopped watching essentially season 2. I was just like, this is background noise at this point. And I'd leave and I'm like, Mom, just keep watching. I don't care. But she's like, did you know that this, will you guess what this and this and this happened at the end? And I'm like, this happened. She goes, how'd you know that? I'm like, I read.
Yeah.
Like, I've been doing this for so long.
So much better.
I knew what she was going to do. And I was just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Which is what you don't want. It's essentially what we're saying is you don't want it to be so predictable that we're like, yeah, she did this, this, and this. Did you read this? Nope, didn't need to.
Right. Like, I don't know if you've seen, there was a reaction after Onyx Storm, and I liked this because I am also a Rebecca, and I will be writing as Rebecca, not as Becky. Because for those of you that don't know, there is a professional wrestler whose name is Becky Lynch. So if you Google my name, you won't find me. You will find her. But there was, after Onyx Storm, because of the way the book ended, people put together, the video version of a meme, whatever you call it, where there was that, was it Vampire Diaries? Where you have that male character yelling, Rebecca! And like, that's kind of a reaction that I want, I don't want you to be able to guess so much of what's going to happen that you're not willing to yell at me to hurry up with the next book. Like, and maybe that's just, I don't know, maybe that's a little bit greedy of me, but I feel like trigger warnings are a delicate balance. And there's a lot of overstepping on it.
One trigger warning that made me happy as all get out. And I was reading a sample of one of the dark romances, but on there it said, your trigger warning is this, all of it. It's all in here. Everything you can think of. Now go on if that's all right with you. See, that kind of trigger warning, I'm like, all right, well, what is all of it then? Let's see what all of it is. And I stopped reading after chapter 3 because I was just like, this ain't gonna work. But the writing was good in general until we got to chapter 3 rape scene. And I was like, nah. If this is how we're starting, I don't even want to know how we're ending this. But I liked one person went, this trigger warnings, this like is pitch black. This is a pitch black dark romance. And like, that makes sense. That is going to tell you who your audience is. And if somebody wants trigger warnings, they're going to know this probably isn't for them. And people who don't want trigger warnings are going to go, okay, but what does that mean? And be intrigued by it. So like, it's one of those instances, I've only seen it once. But like that might be the way to do that.
I'd almost rather have those warning, like, I know, and again, this goes back to just me being greedy and living in my own imagination, but I'd rather have the warnings come from readers and reviews like, hey, if you're sensitive to this topic, this may not be for you, but it was done well, or, whatever. Like, I would, those are the types of things that I would like to see. But, I do intend over the course of however long this series ends up being, I do intend to cover some fairly dark themes. you know? So.
But you're writing a fantasy, which happens to like generally have darker themes. So, I mean,
But
good
again, I mean,
versus
that
evil.
goes back to, you know, do you really need a warning for violence on horror? Like, it's, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my big ones. It's just, you know, the overuse and abuse of the trigger warning system and how it impacts the effect of a book on a reader, either positively or negatively. Because, like I said, I mean, you know, there's definitely a time and place for them. You know, and you know, if you're a reader who really struggles with certain topics, then, you know, I don't want you to read my books and have a very bad reaction because you went into it blind, by any means.
I feel like trigger warnings are more for contemporary romances and contemporary books in general that don't have these kinds of things present in them all the time. Like, it's not almost a rule to have them in there.
That, and like, I kind of feel like, you know, we had touched on the topic of how trope marketing almost negates the need for a blurb on the back. And I feel like if a blurb is well done, it negates the need, first of all, for trope marketing, but also for a lot of those trigger warnings. And, you know, I know that, you know, the back blurb and for a lot of authors is harder than the book itself. I get it. I do. Like, if you were to ask me to give you a 5-sentence rundown of the book that I'm writing right now, could I do it? Fuck no.
This is one of the only times where I will definitely advocate for use AI for this, because at least as a jumping off point, because that's what I generally do. I'm like, these are my tropes. These are the situation, my characters. I try to give as full of a picture without giving it my story as I can. And like, how would you sell this book? And I feel like that's a great jumping off point, because most people's issue with blurbs is not even knowing where to start. Like, how do you summarize? Like, if you think about when you do traditional publishing, you have to give them a synopsis, which is a 2 to 5 page pretty much
Rundown.
This is what the book is about, exactly, point by point. And that's really hard for a lot of people too. I have to do that for my job. So like, I'm used to, I pretty much just go through my chapters and go, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. But that would be one of those times where I would advocate. It's going to help you a lot, and to not beat yourself up over, one, using a tool to help you with that, or two, the fact that it really sucks to write those things. So.
Yeah. So that was one of my controversial pet peeves.
I have a tropey, I guess it's tropey pet peeve, and it's the absolute evil as your counterpart. Like, in a horror book, I get it, but like in every fantasy, why is like the king the absolute most evil base? Like,
it's always the king. Like, it's always the king or his closest advisor.
And they have no humanity left. I edited, so like really early in my editing career, is probably the 4th book I ever edited for the first company I worked for. And she kept giving us the point of view of the evil guy, which I think in general, you probably shouldn't give us his point of view. We don't need it. Like, we can suffice without it. But she tried to make him so wholly evil and had no scrap of humanity. And I'm like, so he's a caricature. He's flat. Because you wouldn't give him any depth and you only let him be evil, he became boring.
There's a series called can't remember if the series is the same as is entitled the same as the first book, but the first book is the Blacksmith Queen. And the evil character, she, you know, spoiler alerts here, she winds up, she's the sister of the main character from book 1, and she winds up she weasels her way into becoming queen of the land, and she is evil. But there's a nuance to her, and she does get some point of view chapters, and the interesting thing with her is that she is, now it's a fantasy and it's a medieval setting, so it's the word isn't used, but she's a sociopath. Like there's no emotion to her at all, and she's incredibly brilliant. She's very, very smart, and so she doesn't come across as flat. And it's really interesting that you bring up the evil overlord altogether, because I was actually thinking about that recently. And Zach and I were talking about that, not in the context of books, but actually in the context of modern politics, and that everybody's on the side of angels. Like nobody actually thinks that they're doing the wrong thing for Trump doesn't think that he's doing the wrong thing for the country. Biden didn't think he was doing the wrong thing for the country. Neither did Obama. They all want the best for the country. They just all have very different opinions on how to get there. Okay. And I'm not saying that to start a political thing or to piss off anybody in the audience, just to give context for where this conversation came from, is that everybody's on the side of the angels. Very rarely do you come across anybody in real life who is all one thing or all the other. Nobody's all good, nobody's all bad. It's very, very rare that that's the case. Most of us are way too complex for that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes an antagonist very nuanced and relatable, is that you got to give them that mix. Mm-hmm. Right? That said, anytime I have this conversation, there is a person that comes to mind. That even just thinking about this person just freaks me out a little bit, because I am pretty sure that she was the devil. And I'm not even being facetious. Like and anybody that heard us talk last week heard that, I was in Iraq for several months when I was enlisted. I worked in not a long-term prison, but a short-term holding cell in that time. And we had a prisoner there who, trying to think of how to phrase this. So she was, all right. So how you would hear stories about how the insurgents would have leverage over just everyday Iraqis to force them into doing things that they didn't want to do and partaking in the insurgency. So she was one of those people. She looked like she should be she was short. She had curly hair. She had, she had her painted fingernails. She looked like and she was older. She looked like she should have been in a bathroom baking cookies with her grandkids somewhere. She was torturing children to force their parents to partake in the war in the way that she wanted them to. And she didn't admit it during her interviews. But every incident that they recited for her that she took part in, every horror that this woman inflicted on children, she just sat in that chair and smiled. And so to me, when I see an evil overlord, the thing that trips me up about it is it's always the king or their advisor. To me,
it's that woman.
It's that woman. And she was just a normal citizen.
And that's something that Jason and I have talked about a lot, which is one that we always suspect the evil to be the king and their advisors and whatnot. And you're always taught to trust the little old ladies, the grandmas, like those are the ones you helped with the car and everything else. And so often they're used in kidnappings and stuff, like to lure people from that sense of safety, because we think of our moms and our grandmothers in a loving, caring way most of the time.
There's a movie.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie Devil? So the premise is it's like an office building, right? And there's this group of people, they're in an elevator and the elevator dies. Like they're just trapped in between floors. So they're all just standing there. And then, you've got security that's talking back and forth to them. They're watching the video and then the audio goes out. And then all of a sudden all the lights go out and they can't see what's happening and you can't hear what's happening. And then when it comes back on, somebody in the elevator is dead. and it just keeps going, and the murders get more and more brutal, and there's all sorts of undertones going on, and it's never the person that you expect. Which, do you care if I give spoilers for this? Because it's an interesting movie, but do you care if I give any spoilers for this?
Go for it.
Okay, so the person doing the killing was a little old lady, but she's not a little old lady. She's the devil. And
it's brilliant.
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely brilliant. It was very well done, in my opinion, and I thought the storytelling was really good.
What's this called again? I'm gonna go watch it.
I believe it's called Devil. Let me.
Okay. I'm gonna make the boys watch it with me.
Yeah, called Devil.
See, and I bet it's more interesting because we're not in her head. And going back to the point that I had earlier, and I'm thinking once again of Dune, and I know we talked about this last time, but when in the first third of the book, you get in the point of view of the character who's pretty much a traitor, and you show us him being a traitor, it ruins it when the character realizes it. So like that kind of shit really drives me crazy. And I can get like snippets of the bad guy point of view that the main character doesn't know to create, and you can increase tension that way. But more often than not, when I see it done, like I saw this in my reread of oh god, not J.D. Robb, who's the other one? She's another one of those vampire writers, like, and she does initials, and I can't think of what her name is for the life of me. It's gonna drive me crazy. Black Dagger Brotherhood. J.R. Ward.
Yeah. I was thinking, I had the J and I had the War in my head, but for some reason I was going JD, and I'm like, it's not JD because that's JD Robb, and you get them confused all the time.
Yes. So in the first book of her Black Dagger Brotherhood, we get the bad guy's point of view over and over again. It's once again that plain evil for being evil. He's got no real reason for it. He just wants to do bad things. And we keep seeing them doing these things, but it doesn't actually add anything to the story and the tension. Like, it doesn't really matter if we get that. The story would be no different if we didn't get that for the people we're actually rooting for and in their heads most of the time. And that's why it's a big pet peeve of mine to have that kind of shit in there. I'm like, there's just no point. There's just no point. If you need that character and they're just evil, then just show them doing stuff. You don't have to give me their internals. I know they're just fucktards. It's fine. Like, I get it. But yeah. Unfortunately, we're going to have to, like, in the next few minutes, I'm going to have to get off because the boys are waiting for me for something. So, are there any last lingering pet peeves or tropes you want to mention before we go?
I think, and this one kind of straddles both topics, but it also, I think we touched on this a little bit last week too, is the dark romance genre. And how that's another thing that I think is a very delicate balance. It's a very thin rope to walk.
Not romanticizing abuse.
Exactly.
I blame Beauty and the Beast for this. I wrote and presented a paper on Beauty and the Beast and like the depiction of men in Disney movies. But I mean, he wasn't the same kind of abuse we're talking about in dark romance, but like the romanticizing of he treats me badly and then slowly falling in love, that Stockholm syndrome thing. And, but I can change him.
Oh,
that's what that story means to me.
Yeah.
If we just had there's a furry over there who wants to give me free food, free books, and like a free roof, fine. Like that's fine on its own.
I mean, to be fair though, there was a time in my life, before I was married, that if you had offered me my own library, I hook, line, and sinker.
But yes, so it's funny because as we're doing a dark romance box, we're starting to create and curate that for my job, and I'm reading these things. I'm like trying to figure out what dark romance actually is, and it's supposed to be the darker themes. It doesn't mean that the main character needs to be abused by the other main character at all, or they need to be beaten on screen or raped or any of those. Like, those aren't what a dark romance's genre is when you break it down specifically. It's supposed to be, yes, there's violence in there. They're dealing with trauma in their lives. And I've read a lot of them that usually would have once been considered dark romance that are now considered romantic suspense and thrillers. Like, because people have made it so much of their darkest fantasies, like a rape fantasy and that kind of thing, that's how we've started to lean that way. And I'm not a big fan of that going that way, honestly.
I think part of that too was that, with the broad marketalization of, BDSM.
50 Shades of Grey. I know we won't get into that. That's a whole nother thing. But,
I think with that came a lot of, everybody saw how well that did, and that all just went down to luck, timing, and marketing, in my opinion. But and it concerns me. It really does, because I think a large part of the balance that you need in order to have a dark romance that is not just straight on abuse, and it's not trauma bonding, and it's not, any number of other issues, is where and how do you utilize the healthier aspects of the connection between those characters? In what ways are they taking care of each other instead of just tearing at each other? And, not just in the bedroom, not just aftercare with BDSM, but, when you start talking about emotional care, the emotional upkeep of being in a relationship, when you neglect that, that's when it stops having any pretense of anything other than abuse. Mm-hmm. And I think that gets neglected quite a bit. And yeah. And I think a lot of people conflated a BDSM lifestyle with dark romance, and they're not synonymous, really.
BDSM and abuse are very different. Like, it might look like that from the outside, but they're very cultivated relationships with rules and consent. And you lay out all of these things that you're comfortable with or not, and you go from there. It's not just, he's feels like beating the shit out of her today, so he's just going to beat the shit out of her today, and she's going to like it. Like, that's not how it works.
And it's all built on trust. And, in my opinion, a lot of books that are labeled as dark romance violate that trust. Over and over and over again. It's not just oops, I got caught up and paddled you a little too hard. It's, you're using knives and, all sorts of crazy, like, you're actually hurting these characters. And it's concerning because there are going to be readers who
look at their own relationships and think that's okay.
Yeah. Or because of trauma, go seek that type of thing out. And that concerns me. And again, that goes back to research, honestly. Like, if you're going to be including dark themes like that, that cross over into the bedroom, you really need to, if you're not part of the lifestyle and you don't have a healthy relationship inside of that lifestyle, you need to be doing your dang research. I mean, I have books that I'm reading, and that's a good step, honestly. Mm-hmm. But at some point, what's going to happen is my Google searches are going to get a lot more fucking weird. And I'm going to start reaching out to people in the community as, like, hey, can you give me, your take on how I wrote this? Does this work?
Reddit. There's a lot of BDSM threads on Reddit that you can be like, hey, I'm writing this. I want to make sure it's true. I'm not part of the community, or I'm not part of this part of the community. Can you guys give me advice? So I think that'd be Reddit's a great tool to get people from all over the world and all different lifestyles to help you with your research if you need some place to start. But unfortunately, we're at that time and I need to go, which is a great way to end this talking about BDSM and abuse. I don't know, but we'll
Don't
be
beat your
back.
partner.
Yeah.
I think, what is next week? I don't even know where I'm at in the freaking calendar right now. Next week is the 30th. Oh my God, your birthday is next week.
Yeah, Wednesday. I'll be 41.
And I get to see you a couple days later. So next week, I think let's do something fun next week. We could talk cover art loves and hates. We could talk urban fantasy and world blending.
I like both of those things.
I'll let
If
you
anybody
pick them,
here
'cause
has
it's your
a
birthday.
preference, leave it in the comments. We will get to that. Definitely let's start with cover art, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about.
And then do we want to maybe, if we have time in New York, maybe do a special episode where we're not talking on two different screens?
Yeah, that'd be fun. We might even have Mom chime in the background, or Bella, because Bella's going to be there. And she's a horror reader. So, and she likes to write. She's a playwright. So we might get something out of her too. I don't know if she wants to be on screen, but she's been on TV. So
I had thought at some point we should give this whole thing like a title.
Right now it's Live with My Bestie.
You know what's funny is, like, I kept thinking, I know you have to go, but I kept thinking of ways that we could incorporate like some sort of beverages, because I get really thirsty when I talk a lot, and I will lose my voice if I'm not careful. So I don't know if you see, I've been sitting here sipping on waters, but like, I don't know, that might evolve into like hard lemonade or wine, or I don't know.
I don't drink, but that's
but you could do like coffee, or did I ever give you my homemade hot chocolate recipe?
You'll have to send that to me.
We could make it while we're in New York.
Let's do it. We do hot chocolate, and maybe Mom wants us to make pies. So.
I went apple picking.
I love apple picking.
I have to make pies. Unfortunately, the Macintosh were gone, but they did have some others that I had never tried before that no, I lied. The Cortlands were gone. I got Macintosh.
Which is a good substitute.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, but I gotta go. Thank you for being here. We had a lot of fun talking about this. I'm sure we could talk about it for another hour or so, but I got boxes to pack. But yeah, I love you, honey. I will see you next time. Thanks everyone for being here.
Bye, everybody.